What's up, guys? In this video, I'm going to talk about some of the top 2022 NFL draft prospects that will be playing today in the game between Alabama and Florida at 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time on CBS. Now, of course, Alabama's loaded with talent. We already know, so we've been over Alabama once already. But Florida also has quite a few players that could end up going in the 2022 NFL draft. Outside of three players I'm going to mention right now, who are sophomores. So we're only talking about guys who are eligible for the 2022 NFL draft. So any kind of true freshmen to sophomores, they will not appear, with the exception of three players I want to talk about right now. Sophomore quarterback Bryce Young, sophomore linebacker Will Anderson Jr., who is day-to-day with a knee injury and might not play, and sophomore defensive back Malachi Moore for Alabama. All three of these players are super talented. All three of them have the potential to be top 15 picks in the 2023 NFL draft when they're eligible, but again, they're not eligible for the coming NFL draft. Instead, the guys who are eligible who might play and see a significant role for Alabama going forward in the season, guys like John Metchie III. At wide receiver, Alabama, of course, has a history of producing first-round caliber wide receivers. I don't think Metchie's going to see the same hype as guys like Henry Ruggs, who had the elite speed, or Jerry Jeudy. I don't think he's going to be on the same level as some of the guys like Devonta Smith or even Jalen Waddle either. There's a real chance he ends up going in the second round, but I think he's definitely going to go in the first or second round. He's going to go in the top 64 selections or so. I think there's still a good chance he makes it in the first round, but again, this is a guy who's not on the same level necessarily as someone like even a Henry Ruggs, who maybe was not as talented in retrospect as some people thought he was because of his limited route tree. But I don't think Metchie has the same physical traits, same speed as Ruggs. So I think Metchie's going to potentially fall into the second round. As of right now, 11 receptions and 146 yards and a touchdown through 2 games. Another player I think is going to be a day 3 selection, running back Brian Robinson Jr. Alabama has a ton of running backs in the NFL. We all know about that. And even the late round selections for them seem to turn into decent running backs. Even the guys who go undrafted turn into pretty valuable assets for some teams. But Brian Robinson Jr. only has 22 carries for 130 yards and a touchdown so far this season. Again, I think he'll be drafted. I think it's just going to be a very late round selection. Junior tight end Jello Billingsley, who a lot of people thought were going to be the best tight end in the nation, or was going to be the best tight end for the 2022 NFL draft entering the season, does not have a reception yet. So, Nick Saban does not care about your mock drafts. Nick Saban does not care about the hype. Billingsley has not really played a large role in the Alabama offense right now. Could he still be drafted based on his potential? Absolutely. But it's not looking so good right now. He'll be drafted, even if he goes in the NFL draft and his kind of pace continues where he doesn't see a lot of playing time, he'll still be selected. I have no doubt about that. But again, it's not going to be a potential first-round selection like some people had mocked back in the spring. Junior left tackle Evan Neal is playing on the right side as well. He's just a mountain of a man. I always forget the exact numbers, but he's tall for the tackle position, and he's got so much weight packed in there. He's going to be a monster. And he's already a very powerful player in the running game. I think the concern with him is going to be his pass protection, which sometimes struggles throughout the year. Doesn't always hold up. But again, so good in the running game already. And probably will be a right tackle in the NFL. I don't think he's going to be a left tackle, but there's a chance that changes depending on how he plays the rest of the year. He's 6'7", 350 pounds. So there you have it. The numbers are astonishing for him. Like you said, probably going to be a right tackle in the NFL, even though he's playing left tackle this year. But that, of course, could change. Right now, he's viewed as being the top tackle in the draft, but I don't think he's on the same level as like a Penei Sewell or even a Rashawn Slater for sure. Because Slater had versatility. You know he's going to work at some position. And Penei Sewell have been so dominant at such a young age. I don't think Neal's going to be in the same class as those guys. I don't think he's even locked in as the top tackle in this class yet. But it certainly looks like he's going to build a pretty significant lead over everyone behind him at this rate. Staying on the offensive line, senior right tackle Chris Owens, who actually played center a lot last year when Landon Dickinson was hurt. He's out there, along with junior right guard Emil Ekiyor Jr., I believe is how you say his last name. Those two guys, again, probably mid-round to late round selection. It's not going to be anything super special in terms of where they get drafted, but still players to keep an eye on. On the defensive line, there's a lot of guys who probably could be late round selections. The guy who I would focus the most on would be LaBryan, defensive end for them. Has made an impact the past couple of years. Could have probably gone to this past draft and gotten taken. It's just that, he's kind of an average producer. He's nothing super special. He's still a very good player, don't get me wrong. And anybody who ends up in the NFL is a good player. But he does not necessarily separate himself from a loaded class of defensive ends and defensive linemen who can create pressure. And again, he's kind of a bit of a tweener between that defensive end, defensive tackle level because of how big he is and how strong he is. Bunch of linebackers I want to talk about, some of which who might not play in this game. Christian Harris is obviously the one everyone knows about. He's potentially the most popular, most well-known linebacker in the 2022 class, and he has the potential to be the first linebacker taken. Other linebacker who we might not see because of an arm injury, junior linebacker Henry Toto, I think it's how to say his last name, and if it's wrong, blame ESPN, because that's who I got the pronunciation from watching their programming. But he's a transfer from Tennessee, hasn't really played a lot yet this year because of an arm injury, but the expectation is when he gets on the field, he'll be one of the better linebackers in all of college football. Another player I wouldn't expect to see, Christopher Allen, who's kind of a linebacker/edge for Alabama, who got injured, I believe, in the first game of the year against Miami, and has suffered a significant foot injury, so I wouldn't expect to see him. But if he had been available, this guy would be one of the ones to keep an eye on because he's been so good for them in recent history. Senior cornerback Josh Jobe and junior safety Jordan Battle kind of finished it out for Alabama. Two really good defensive backs. Both have first-round aspirations and have a legit chance of going in the first round. Jordan Battle, though, might be the third best safety in this class, and you're not really going to see three safeties taken in the first round. So that's going to be a difficult situation for him. And Josh Jobe, again, the cornerback class is so loaded that Jobe could end up sliding down into the second round as well. So that's it for Alabama. Let's get to Florida now. I still need to mention him, even though he has not played well this year, and I would say he's probably in danger of losing his starting job, just based on how poorly he's done so far this season. And don't get me wrong, he has been playing poorly. He's been putting up a lot of turnover where he plays. He's just not been performing at a high level. 4 interceptions to only 2 passing touchdowns. It's Redshirt junior Emery Jones, the quarterback for Florida, who again can hit big plays, can be a very explosive player, but just is not. He's not been good. He's not been good. It's the only way to put it. He's been putting the ball in harm's way too often, which is why Florida ended up in their last game putting in their backup quarterback, who had a fairly decent outing, but probably is not prepared to face a team like Alabama. Senior running back Dameon Pierce is another one I want to keep an eye on. So that Florida offense has one more player too. I would also watch Redshirt junior wide receiver Jacob Copeland. Those are the only 3 players in the offense I really would focus on right now if you're Florida. They just don't have a ton of NFL talent up front compared to Alabama. They have so much on offense. I don't think Florida has that. Copeland, you do have a lot of respect for because he does have 190 yards and 2 touchdowns through 2 games already, but he doesn't necessarily have the prototypical size, build, or athleticism that you want for an NFL wide receiver. So his physical traits are not going to jump off the table at you, which is why he's going to be probably stuck as a mid-round selection or late-round selection, despite being productive so far in the season. Defensively, there's a lot more to keep an eye on for Florida. Senior defensive end Zachary Carter has been phenomenal so far this year. It seems like he's going for a real breakout campaign based on his production, and this is a guy who we need to keep an eye on because, again, Florida's produced a lot of defensive talent over the years. He already has 3 sacks, and he, just for a record, had 5 in 2020 and 4.5 in 2019, 3 sacks in 2 games this year, and 5.5 tackles for loss. So he's on pace for a really good season. Granted, the level of competition is not necessarily there so far through the first 2 games of the year, but if you already have it how to start, you have to keep following it up. Senior interior defensive lineman in Alabama transfer Dequan Newkirk is someone I want to keep an eye on as well. Probably a late-round selection, but again, someone just to watch. And of course, senior linebacker and junior linebacker Ventrell Miller, and they said junior linebacker Brenton Cox Jr. Bit of an edge rush. Both of them kind of rush the passer a little bit. They have kind of this tweener feel to them, at least Brenton Cox Jr. does. It's kind of been up and down with these two. I've seen them everywhere mocked from being first-round guys to being mocked in the 3rd or 4th round. It really comes down to how well they perform this year. Brenton Cox, obviously a former Georgia transfer, had 3.5 sacks and 10 tackles for loss last year. Has not really gotten much on the board so far this season. But of course, they're waiting for him to have more of an impact on that defense. Ventrell Miller may be more of a central player to this defense currently. He's been there for 4 years at this point. He had 3.5 sacks last year, along with 86 tackles, 8 tackles so far this year. No tackles for loss yet. So those 2 guys are kind of very versatile, but at the same point very volatile in their ability to produce. So I could see them going anywhere from late 1st round to 4th round at this point. Everyone wants to talk about the junior cornerback Kaiir Elam, obviously one of the best defensive backs this entire draft class. Elam came into the offseason as viewed potentially as the number 2 corner in this entire grouping behind Derek Stingley Jr. He's kind of dropped back a little bit since then, but he already has an interception this year. And Elam has been productive for Florida for the past 2 years. He's been productive since his freshman season when he had 2 interceptions. So you have to keep an eye on Kaiir Elam. There's a chance he ends up being cornerback number 2 in this draft class. There's a chance he could be corner number 5 and still go in the 1st round. So I would project him as the 1st round pick no matter what at this point, just based on how well he's performed in the past 2 years and what he's done so far earlier this season. And the last one I want to talk about is safety Trey Dean III. Could have gone this past draft class, probably would have been taken very low. Now he's sticking around. He's in an elite safety class. I just don't know where he's going to end up. He's probably going to be a 5th to 7th round selection, a day 3 guy. He's been semi-productive throughout his career in Florida. He's got an interception each year, of his time with the program, so his freshman year, sophomore year, junior year. Has not picked one off yet this year. But of course, we're only 2 games in. He's probably going to get drafted. He could be a high priority UDFA, but right now, like I said, late round selection, high priority UDFA. The real stud in that defense is Ekiyor Elam, but there are a lot of other players to keep an eye on here. Like I said, Ventrell Miller and Brenton Cox Jr. could be first round picks, depending on how they perform during the season. And Zachary Carter is someone to keep an eye on. He's one of the fastest risers in the draft right now. So those are the players to keep an eye on for the Florida versus Alabama game. And if you feel like you enjoyed this video, if you feel like you learned a little something, go check out my other videos on players to watch for the upcoming games. We're going to talk about Auburn, Penn State, Miami versus Michigan State, and also Cincinnati versus Indiana.